Amud Base. We're on page 28b, and we were learning yesterday about the laws of making kiddush before musaf, also before shacharis on Shabbos or Yontiv. Person wants to eat before musaf. What they need to make kiddush, and of course, the common minhag is to make kiddush before musaf. But it's not. I shouldn't. You can't say that everyone agrees with that. There are sources that there were great rabbis that didn't follow that. There were some rabbis that felt you don't need to make kiddush before musaf. If someone was to eat, there is a big shiloh if a person's allowed to have a meal before musaf. Our Gemara says that we don't paskin that you're not allowed to taste something before musaf, which commentaries explain. At least one of the main views is that it means the size of an egg would be allowed. You could have bread the size of an egg. That would be allowed because we don't paskin. You're not allowed to taste stuff before musaf. You are allowed to. We hold you're allowed to, and that would mean you would be allowed to have the size of an egg, which is a double kazayas, two olive sizes of bread. That would be permissible before musaf. And that would apply to the same. That would apply to bread or to mazainas, which is in the Talmudic language. It's called pas haba b'kisnin, the type of bread, cake or cookies and so on. There is a big question of why do we find like on Rosh Hashanah a lot of shuls make kiddush before tekiyos? Anyone here go to a shul that they make kiddush before they blow shofar? They make kiddush because davening is so long, so they make everyone. No one here makes kiddush. Okay, well, I've gone to many yeshivas, and many of the yeshivas, they would make kiddush before they daven musaf, before tekiyos even, before they blow shofar. And on Rosh Hashanah. Yes.
Simchat Torah.
Simchas Torah also, right. Simchas Torah, many shuls do it, right. But I believe even Rosh Hashanah. I mean, I've been in shuls that do that they have a kiddush before the tekiyos. They're davening from early in the morning. They do a very long shacharis. The morning, it's going to be very long until they finish davening, and therefore they make a kiddush before the tekiyos. And the thing is, people aren't so careful only to have a little olive size, 2 olive sizes of cake. They eat 3 pieces of cake. Good Danish, which is maybe like 4, probably like 4, the size of like 4 eggs. Good cheese Danish or chocolate Danish, nice and big, whatever it is. You definitely, this is not a little tiny taste. This is, sort of like a breakfast. You're eating so the question is, how do we do that? Now, I did mention that there is one view, the Bach, that holds that although traditionally we don't make a meal before musaf, but according to the letter of the law, it is permissible to have a meal. And he uses the term, al titoish kairasi mecha, don't forget the teachings of your mother, that there's a tradition. Traditionally, we don't have a meal, but according to the letter of the law, you're allowed to. Because of that, that would be a source. That people are going to be hungry and they want to daven musaf, properly. So they rely, they rely on that bach, on that opinion that says that it's that we're really allowed to have a meal. There are other explanations. Other explanations are given. Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach tries to figure out a reason why it would be permissible. We find people do it. So why would it be permissible? Or the same question would be Simchas Torah as well, like Ezra mentioned. that Simchas Torah people do. You wash even you wash. You have a normal size. You have a nice big challah roll. Challah roll is more than an egg size. So why do people do that? He says because, well, he gives another explanation. He mentions that there is he mentions two things. One of them is that if you eat the size of an egg, that law, you can't eat more than that. But that law that you can't eat more than that applies every 9 minutes, which means that you can eat that size in 9 minutes, then wait 9 minutes and eat another. So he says that in a certain, it's possible that people don't end up eating it all in one eating. And therefore, that would be one of the rooms for leniency. And I forget that he gave a second reason, and I'm forgetting now what his second reason was, that it should be permissible that people rely on there's some reason why maybe you'd be allowed to have more than an egg size, than a kubeya. It'll come to me after. So so that was one discussion that we were talking about, and I mentioned that this argument of eating before Musaf, it has it develops into another discussion, and that is, do you really need to make Kiddush if you're going to eat before Musaf? In other words, is this a time for Kiddush? And it's based on the fact that, are you allowed to really have a meal now? If you're allowed to have a meal now, then there's reason to say you need to make Kiddush. But if you're really not allowed to have a meal, you're only allowed to taste some food, there's two ways of looking at it. Maybe you don't need to make Kiddush because your Kiddush is supposed to be with a meal. And this is not really considered a meal. That's one way of looking at it. So therefore, in other words, this argument of eating before Musaf, it actually branches off to another discussion of would you need to make Kiddush or not, because the Kiddush is based on the fact that you're supposed to have Kiddush at the time of a meal. It's called Kiddush b'makam suda. So these two arguments are connected to each other. Not 100%, because it's possible that you're allowed to only taste the size of an egg, and that would be considered good enough for a meal, and maybe that opinion could fit with either view. But the other opinion, that you're allowed to have a whole meal, would definitely imply that you need to make a full-fledged Kiddush because you're allowed to have a full meal. That opinion definitely fits with the obligation of making Kiddush before Musaf. The other view that says that you're not allowed to have a meal, but you're allowed to have what's called a te'ima, a taste, which would mean you can eat the size of an egg, but not more than that, of cake or of bread. That opinion, you could look at both ways. Possibly that's considered a meal, or possibly it's not really considered a meal, and therefore that would not obligate Kiddush. So that we did touch upon yesterday. We have a few questions. I think Susan was first. Susan?
I just wanted to ask you, Rabbi, all of this is when a girl is 12, and then when a boy is 13, in other words, then they're expected to go by the rules. But before that, when it's a little kid and they're hungry.
It depends. It's a good question you're asking. At what age would you obligate a child not to eat before Kiddush, especially if the child is hungry? So the two things. First of all, you should know that it's not hard for a child to make their own Kiddush, and all they need is grape juice. So a kid could make their own Kiddush. They don't need to wait for some adult to come and make Kiddush. So that's number one. And number two, we do start before the age of 12 and 13. There's something called chinuch, where machanech children, we educate them. And therefore, it would be advisable that children that are able to wait for Kiddush, they should wait for Kiddush, and they should be taught not to eat before Kiddush at whatever age is apropos for them. But definitely, when they're 9 or 10, they should definitely not be eating.
Exactly.
There's no reason why they should have to eat before Kiddush, or someone could make Kiddush for them and so on. Okay, well, good question, Susan. Yes, Ezra. I'm not Ben.
I wanted to say, I thought we talked about a group of people that do Kiddush on a regular Shabbat too, before Musaf. So what's the big deal if they do it once or twice or 10 times? If they keep doing it every Shabbat, they can do it on Rosh Hashanah.
Right. It's really the opposite. The people who do it on Rosh Hashanah, this should not be an excuse to go do it every Shabbat. But the people who do it every Shabbat, I'm not upset that they, before Tekiyas, they're going to eat something because they're going to be starving before the end of davening. Yeah. But and they should be able to daven properly. It's really the opposite. The people who do it every Shabbos, it's really an act of dropping one's responsibilities, an act of prikas oil. At least the way I see it, you're trying to. It's I don't know what the English translation of prikas oil, but it's removing the yoke of heaven, of obligation, of Torah, of Hashem, and looking for sort of like dropping things, and it's one step in the wrong direction. Yes,
but I wanted to say also, as far as Susan's thing about the children in our shul, I know that all the kids go to the kitchen and get themselves ice cream or a drink or whatever, but this way they don't disturb as much.
Yeah.
So there used to be a big debate if you should be bringing children to shul, and
you have to start them someplace.
So there's the old generation felt that if they can't daven, if they don't know how to read, if they're not capable of sitting through davening, then don't bring them. That was the old. The new generation says the women can't handle all the kids at home. You got to bring them to shul. So it became
You'd be surprised how early kids in our shul are praying. I see little kids with a siddur and praying the whole prayer.
Right. So that's the thing that if they're capable of sitting through the davening, then there's no question they should come to shul. Right. I wouldn't force them to come, but if they're agreeable to come to shul, very nice. But if they can't sit through the davening, that's where you have this big debate that generally the women just want to get them out of the house, and then the shul has to deal with how do we keep them entertained. And so one of the answers to that question is sugar. Sugar is a very good answer. You give them, pack them in with sugar, and that will be the best answer to all problems. And so that's one of the ways. So then the shul start, and they hire a kids program, they hire someone to run a kids program, and so on. But but it boils down to the original question of, should kids really be encouraged to go to shul when they're not capable of davening? When they're capable of davening is one thing, but before that, so they have all these new ways of thinking. Well, it's very nice that they should love shul, and we want them to really enjoy shul. So you have all these excuses. I don't know if they're really necessary. I mean, the old generation didn't have this issue of they need to love shul, as if they didn't love shul, enough in the previous generation. So I'm not really sure if these ideas hold or not. Could be that we're living in people think differently now, so maybe kids do need that. I don't know. You got to speak to the mechanchen, the educators who claim to know the answers. But the next thing that we discussed was the Mishnah. The Mishnah talked about this prayer that Reb Nechunya ben Hakana used to say when he entered the Beis Medrash, and when he left the Beis Medrash. And we spoke about that. He would say, I shouldn't make any mistakes. And then when he would leave, he would thank Hashem. And the Gemara then brought a brisa that develops the entire prayer. And the entire prayer that the brisa that the Gemara brings, and the brisa is that I shouldn't make a mistake. B'yismechu bi chaverai, my friends should not rejoice over me. And I think Avraham asked a good question, like that's a little surprising. Like your friends are gonna rejoice over you when you make a mistake. Now, it does seem like Rashi did learn that way. Rashi says, my friends will be happy. I will cause them to get punished even. So Rashi does seem to learn that there is, that the friends will possibly rejoice over my making a mistake, and that could cause them to get punished.